The storm was coming. Ethan Cross could feel it in the way the wind shifted, that particular drop in pressure, the way the air tasted of iron and wet earth. 23 years of wilderness survival training didn't just live in his head. It lived in his skin, his lungs, his fingertips. He knew what was coming the same way a sailor knows the sea before it turns. He glanced up at the sky. 3 moons of the planet Varrock 4 were already hidden behind a bruised purple wall of cloud. The storm would hit within 6 hours. Maybe 5. Candidates. Professor Cale Veyron's voice cut through the clearing like a blade. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, his species' slate-gray skin catching the last of the fading light. His 4 arms were folded in that particular arrangement that, Ethan had learned, meant absolute authority. You have been issued your single ration pack and 1 change of garment. Nothing else. All technological devices, fire starters, thermal regulators, communication units, atmospheric processors, have been confiscated. Murmurs rippled through the group of 40 survival candidates. 37 of them were alien, Valorians, Drakthi, a pair of Cernathi with their luminous amber eyes wide with quiet panic. 3 were human. Ethan was the only one who didn't look afraid. The Varrock wilderness is classified as a Category 6 hostile environment, Cale Veyron continued, his translator implant rendering his speech into every candidate's language. Tonight's temperature will drop to -18 degrees. Wind speeds will exceed 90 kilometers per hour. The storm system approaching from the eastern ridge will deliver sustained precipitation for approximately 11 hours. He paused, letting the numbers settle like stones into still water. You have until dawn. Build shelter. Survive. Those who cannot demonstrate this most fundamental skill will be removed from the Galactic Survival Corps program. He looked across the group. His pale silver eyes, 4 of them, arranged in a slight arc across his angular face, landed briefly on Ethan. There was something in that gaze. Not cruelty. More like curiosity. The professor had reviewed every candidate's file. He knew what Ethan Cross had done before enrolling. What he'd survived. And yet, Cale Veyron had made a point of singling him out during orientation. Human. You will receive no special consideration here. Your species' reputation does not substitute for demonstrated skill. Ethan had simply nodded. Now, as the other candidates scattered, some already arguing, some huddling together in confusion, some staring at the treeline like it might swallow them, Ethan Cross walked calmly toward the forest edge and disappeared inside. The first thing he did was read the land. He moved through the trees with quiet, deliberate steps, his eyes tracking everything at once: ground slope, drainage patterns, the direction of the wind, the density of the canopy above. He was looking for a specific intersection of features. His mind was already running the geometry before his hands touched anything. High ground. Not the summit, wind. Mid-slope. Natural windbreak. Southern exposure. Drainage running away from the site. He found it in 20 minutes. A natural depression at the base of a granite outcropping, facing south-southwest. The rock would block the worst of the northern wind. The slope would channel rainwater away. The stand of thick-trunked trees uphill would break the storm's initial force before it reached him. Perfect. Ethan shed his outer jacket, folded it carefully, and set to work. He started with the frame. No axe, no saw, but his hands were not empty. They were instruments built by evolution and honed by decades of practice. He found standing dead wood first, dry and light, snapping it at the right lengths by leveraging it against living trunks. He selected pieces with his eyes half closed, running his fingers along the grain, feeling for brittleness, for rot, for the particular resonance of sound wood. The ridgepole went up first, wedged into a fork of the granite outcropping on one end and braced against a living tree on the other. Then the diagonal supports, lashed with strips of inner bark he peeled from a nearby birch analog, the planet's native equivalent, fibrous and strong when wet, stronger when dried under tension. He'd learned the technique from a Mongolian herder who'd taught him on the Siberian steppe. He'd refined it from a bushcraft manual he'd read at age 11. He'd mastered it the winter he'd spent alone in the Alaskan backcountry at 26, after his GPS unit froze and his partner broke an ankle 4 days from the nearest road. His hands moved without hesitation. The muscle memory was older than thought. The walls went up next. He built them using a debris hut technique refined for wind, overlapping layers of large leaves and bark sheeting, angled like scales on a fish, each layer overlapping the one below so rain would sheet off rather than seep through. He chinked the gaps with moss and compressed leaf matter, nature's own insulation. He packed the floor with a thick mattress of the same material, dry leaves from the deep forest floor where rain had not yet reached, 8 inches deep. Dead air trapped in organic matter. Better insulation than most synthetic sleeping pads. The doorway he oriented away from the prevailing wind and fitted with a hanging panel of woven bark strips, quick to make, effective enough. 2 hours. The shelter was structurally complete. He spent the next hour reinforcing it. Added a secondary wind baffle using dead branches angled into the ground upwind of the entrance. Dug a shallow drainage channel around the base with a sharpened stick. Cut additional debris for the roof, thickening the layers until they were nearly a foot deep, enough to shed any precipitation and trap enough radiant heat from his body to keep the interior above freezing even in a Category 6 storm. Then he made fire. No lighter, no ferro rod, no technology of any kind. But Ethan Cross had started fires with his hands in blizzards, in rain, at altitude, in humidity so thick the air felt like warm soup. He collected his materials with the economy of long practice, tinder bundle of the driest fibrous material he could find, sheltered under his jacket during collection, kept against his skin for warmth. A fireboard of soft dry wood. A spindle. A small flat rock as a handhold. The bow drill was assembled from what the forest gave him. Cordage from more inner bark, twisted into a single-ply rope. A bough of flexible green wood. It took him 4 minutes to produce a coal. He'd once done it in under 2 in a competition. But tonight, with alien wood he'd tested but never used before, 4 minutes was excellent. He nestled the coal into the tinder bundle, cupped it in his hands, and blew. The flame caught on the second breath. He built his fire small and smart, inside a stone ring he'd assembled at the shelter entrance, close enough to warm the interior but not close enough to risk ignition, with a flat reflector stone positioned to direct heat inward. He fed it carefully, building a bed of coals rather than a roaring blaze. Coals lasted. Coals meant sustained heat through the night. The storm hit at the 3rd hour. It was tremendous. Even in the forest, the wind screamed. Rain came in horizontal sheets. The temperature dropped fast, and Ethan could hear, distantly, the sounds of distress from other parts of the wilderness, voices calling out, a Dracthy candidate using a distress whistle, the low thrum of a rescue shuttle beginning its sweeps. Inside his shelter, Ethan Cross lay on his back in 8 inches of dry leaves, watching the small steady glow of his fire through the doorway, and listened to the storm fail to reach him. The walls held. The drainage worked. The fire did not go out. He wasn't comfortable. Survival rarely was. But he was dry, he was warm, and he was going to live until morning. He'd known he would from the moment he'd read the sky and started moving. He pulled his jacket over his chest like a blanket and closed his eyes. Professor Cale Veyron stood at the edge of the tree-line at dawn, rain still dripping from the brim of his thermal hood, watching the rescue tallies come in on his datapad. 22 candidates had activated distress signals. 9 had managed adequate shelter. 6 were borderline, alive, but hypothermic. 3 had performed excellently. 2 of them were species native to cold weather environments. The 3rd was a human. Cale walked through the forest to the site himself. He told his assistant it was a routine inspection. That was not entirely true. He found Ethan Cross dismantling his shelter with the same methodical calm with which, the professor had no doubt, he'd built it. The fire was out, properly extinguished, the stones scattered back to nature. The human was moving the debris back into the forest, leaving the site as he'd found it. The professor stood and watched for a long moment before speaking. "You built this without tools," Cale said. It was not quite a question. Ethan looked up. "Yes, sir. In 2 hours. In advance of a Category 6 storm." A pause. "Using techniques from your home planet?" "Mostly," Ethan said. "I adapted a few things for the local materials. The bark here is more fibrous than what I'm used to. I had to adjust the lashing tension." Cale Veyron was silent for a moment. For silver eyes studied the human with an expression Ethan had not yet learned to read. "My species," the professor said finally, "developed survival technology 14,000 years ago. We have not built unassisted shelter in recorded history." He looked at the now dismantled frame, the evidence of what one human had done with darkness, a coming storm, and nothing but his hands and his knowledge. How long have humans been doing this? Ethan thought about it. About every ancestor who'd looked at an empty, freezing night and decided to solve it. "About 1,000,000 years," he said. "Give or take." Professor Cale Veyron made a notation in his datapad. "Candidate cross, exceptional. Recommend advanced track." He closed the datapad and looked at the human one more time. "Welcome to the Corps," he said. The storm that defeated 22 alien candidates had not touched Ethan Cross. Humanity had been building shelter since before it had language to describe why. Old habits die hard. Especially the ones that keep you alive.